Welcome to the UPD podcast, designed to point men towards Jesus. Real life, real talk. Join us. I'm Andy Lamb.
I'm Jonny Hanson.
This is the UPD podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to the Untrained Philosophical Discussionist. This is our separate space, it's our interview space. And today we're doing the fourth part of our series, the fatherhood series. We're doing stepfather, adoptive father, and mentor. And we got a great friend of ours here who's come to share this space with us today. We're going to do an interview. Andy's got a bio that he's going to read to you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, my name's Jonny Hanson, and this is my good buddy Andy Lamb. We are UPD.
And we always say this between the two of us, we have about 100 years of experience of making mistakes. Today with Dave Fox in here, we officially have 979 years of experience of making mistakes. Thanks for Dave for bringing all those extra years to us.
Read the bio. Read the bio.
Dave Fox was born in the times of Noah.
AD.
Was it BC?
BC.
Yeah, I think it's BC.
BC
is when
AD.
Dave was born. So Dave was born in 1947. He has a bachelor's in psychology that he got in 1970 from Westminster College in Pennsylvania. During that time, he worked as a caseworker in Lawrence County Child Welfare Systems between 1970 and 1973. He went on to get his postgraduate courses in counseling and social work between 72 and 76. Then he began to study theology under Dr. R.C. Sproul with Ligonier Ministries from 1776. Makes about sense. 1976 to 1992. He got his first job. He became an elder of the PCA Presbyterian Church in America in 1978 in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. Then in 1985, he became an elder at a PCA church at Orangewood Presbyterian Church in Maitland, Florida. He became an elder in 2003 of Grace Church, where he currently attends. He is one of the church founders, along with Pastor Mike Adkins, who you will see in a further interview. He's done extensive work in church benevolence and pastoral counseling. He was ordained as a pastor in 2014 and currently serves as a volunteer pastor at Grace Church, doing pastoral counseling and serving on the benevolence team. His first marriage lasted for 29 years, then he was divorced. Second marriage, this year will be 27th anniversary. He's a father of 4, 3 sons and a daughter. He's stepfather to two, a daughter and a son, and he has 7 grandchildren with another due in March. Would you please welcome Pastor Dave Fox?
Hey, Dave.
Pleasure to be here. Can we talk just for a minute?
Please.
Well, we hope to talk for a little bit longer than a minute.
Well,
here we go.
Just a minute on the real reason that I'm here.
Yeah.
And that is, people really want to know why you're so prone to fall off boats.
Oh, Andy. Oh,
Yeah,
gosh. Andy.
Yeah.
This is a good thing for us to... we should probably spend a good hour on this, actually.
We've had people submit ideas like, Andy just likes to get wet.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Andy, would you like to tell us why almost every single time we go fishing, you fall in the water? Almost every time.
So Johnny's the captain of the boat, and Johnny's not a
What else would I be?
Johnny's not a great steerer of the boat. So it's really more
Johnny
Johnny's
just
fault.
got thrown under the boat.
It's really more Johnny's fault than me. Dave, I'm telling you, man, 2 years in a row on a fishing trip to the Keys.
Almost every time we've went, Andy's fallen in the water, Dave. Let's make it simple for everybody to understand. We don't have to get into numbers. Almost all but once. Really, it's all but once.
Yeah. Okay.
Dave, we're pulling up to the marina.
So
I've got 1 foot on the boat, 1 foot on the dock, and the boat starts moving, and I'm doing the splits, and I've got one move. And it happened that first year, and I was like, I can't believe that just happened. Guess what happened the very next year, Dave? I did the same thing. This time I had my phone in my pocket, ripped the entire front end railing off of his boat, going
Oh, yeah.
the water.
Oh, I forgot you wrecked the boat, too. Jeez.
Thanks for bringing that
I just
up.
wanted to clear that up for your
Memories.
listeners.
Yeah, I'm going to need to do some of that counseling with you now. I had repressed all of that, and you just brought it back up, Dave. So thanks, brother.
That's
Really
right.
appreciate having you. Well,
That's right.
this has been a great show today. Thanks for joining us.
All right, goodbye, everybody. That
2
was
words,
it.
Andy. Stop it.
I can't wait to have that conversation with you, Dave.
So, Dave, we want to kind of go through a timeline here. We want to talk, we'll just kind of go through that. We'll probably make some diversions throughout as we kind of explore some of your life.
Sure.
And then we'll get into the topic at hand, the fatherhood topic. But ultimately, we think it's important for us to talk about our past so that we can better understand where we're at today. Did you grow up in a Christian household? How were your parents? What kind of household was that?
My household, up until I was about age 8, was convinced that it was Ozzie and Harriet Nelson.
Hmm.
We had a good time. I mean, Christmas, camping trips, fishing trips. It was great. And then it became very apparent that my father was heavy into alcohol. Back even further. His mother died when he was 8. His dad died when he was 10. He was raised from age 10 to 18 in a Virginia military academy. All male school. And there was only one word that mattered, and that was discipline. So that's all he knew was discipline, and it was harsh. And the more he drank, the harsher the discipline. My mother started coping with it by drinking. And by the time I was 10, 11 years old, they were both just wasted with alcohol. And so from age 10 to 18, I didn't really have a father. I had a 15-year-old who was an alcoholic and a diagnosed schizophrenic running the house.
Was he violent in any way?
Oh, he was always violent.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, when he drank,
Sure.
which was all the time.
There you go.
Was his
He quit work when I was 12 years old.
Okay.
Was his schizophrenia, was that brought out because of the drinking, or did he have moments of it when he wasn't drinking?
That's unknown. He had tendencies toward that. I think even before my parents were married, which was during the war. He was injured in the war.
War of 1812?
No, the American Indian War, Andy.
American Indian War. Yeah. Jeez. I think it was called the Gaelic Wars. He had a pretty serious head injury.
Okay.
Sure.
And I think it started back then.
Interesting.
I mean, we call it PST now. PSTD. Back then it was shell shock.
Yep.
I'm sure that affected him. I mean, there were so many things that I didn't even find out until I was in my 30s. Because neither one of my parents wanted to talk about it.
So you said your father didn't work from about the age of 12?
He,
How did they sustain a household?
by the grace of my great uncle.
Okay.
My great uncle kept him on the payroll. So that there was a roof over our house. I had 3 brothers. So my mother had 5 kids to raise, the 4 of us plus my dad.
Sure.
And my great uncle made sure that the bills were paid, food was on the table.
Was he a Christian guy?
Nope.
Just a benevolent man.
Just family was important to him.
Did you know it at that time that your great uncle was? When did you find that out?
I found that out when I was around 15. Yeah. Right around 15.
Did mom or dad ever express any inclination towards Christ at all?
My father carried a small New Testament in his left shirt pocket all during the war.
Okay.
All TIs were issued this New Testament, and it had a metal plate for the cover. That's why you wore it on your left shirt.
Sure.
So if you took
Cover
a
your
direct
heart.
hit to the heart, it might save you.
Yeah.
He didn't read it. He kind of knew who Jesus was when I became a believer, and I told him that I'd become a believer. He was like, good for you. Good for you.
Did he seem excited about that legitimately, or were those words? What do you think?
That was just, I don't think he had a clue.
What age was that?
I was 14.
14. And how did you come to know Christ at 14 years old?
Okay. So Dr. R.C. Sproul was my youth director at the time, and I sat under his teaching for about a year. And
how did you get to the church?
how do most young guys get to the church?
I don't know. I never went.
Well, my mother would drop us off for Sunday school, and we would go in the front door with hundreds of other kids, down the hallways to our Sunday school rooms. And my brother and I would just walk out the back door into the alley
Sure.
and walk about 4 blocks into town and sit at the drugstore and drink Coca-Cola and eat pretzels and keep an eye on the watch. And when it was time, we'd go back and stand at the back door. When the bell rang, we'd open the door, step in, and come out of the front door just like everybody else.
So what changed that made you stick around some time to hear R.C. Sproul speak?
Well, what changed was a blonde-haired girl that I noticed.
Jeez.
And I noticed
Heard this
her
story before.
Tale as old as time.
and her sister and mother going into church. And it was like, oh, maybe I should go to church.
Hey,
So that's the truth be told. That's why I went to church.
we only talk the truth here, buddy. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Had a Scottish preacher
Oh,
with a pretty serious brogue, hard to understand. So I didn't get much until RC came to the youth group and started actually teaching. And that really opened up a whole new world.
can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, he would bring friends from seminary that would pose as atheists, and the two of them would debate different issues. And if you want to learn, that's a great way to learn
Sure.
because you see both sides of the coin, and things begin to make sense or they don't make sense, and you ask a lot of questions.
Did you experience your friends at this time sticking around, or your brother or anybody there that was also kind of getting it the way you were?
Well, there were a number of us.
Okay.
Yeah, there were a number of us that if you knew RC, especially back then, very, very charismatic. And so
Really?
as junior high kids, I mean, it was like the Pied Piper. He played volleyball with us for an hour to wear us out
Okay.
and then bring us inside and make sure we had something to eat, and then would start teaching.
Kind of like a man's man then? I mean, he's into sports. He's
Oh,
getting
he
you guys
was. Oh,
going.
absolutely.
Well, that's attractive to young kids.
Absolutely, yes.
Especially if you don't have somebody at home that's emulating that to you.
And
Bingo.
Yeah. And he was, always polite with people. So it was a very different dynamic. It was great being there. The more time I could spend there, the less time at home.
Sure.
So that was great too.
Were they your parents, that is, getting back to that piece, are they conflicting and you guys are seeing it? It's in front of you?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah. My mother would drink and would become the weepy drunk.
Mm.
And my dad would drink and become the volatile, I dare you.
Mm.
And, there were times when we'd go to bed and hear dishes breaking and whatnot. And the next day, the house was trashed. And my dad would get up and we got blamed for the house being trashed.
Wow.
And out would come the belt, and we knew better than to argue. So it was, just not very pleasant.
Sure.
Where in your line of siblings, where do you stand age-wise with the
Second.
rest? You're the second.
I had a brother that was 18 months older, and then a brother that was 3 years younger, and then another one that's 6 years younger.
Did you find in that when your dad would be disciplinarian like that, was he equal in the way he disciplined all of you, or did
Oh,
he?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He didn't
Everybody
have
got
one- Everybody got the same.
Everybody got the same punishment. Yeah. I mean, I tease my younger brother now. He and I are the only two left in the family. But I tease him now and say that he got away with murder because, he was the young, funny, cute one.
Mm.
And, he'd just smile and say, well, of course,
Yeah.
As a friend of yours, you've told me before about when you were maybe about 14 or so, you were diagnosed with diabetes.
I was.
Is that around the same time you're accepting Jesus? Is this before? Is this after?
This was,
Because this really went on to shape a lot of
Right.
the future of your life.
yes. Yeah. When I was 14, let's see, it was June of the year I was 14, it was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
which, I was looking forward to. There was a guy in our neighborhood that had been a commander on the USS Nautilus.
Mm.
and he brought us home caps, sailor caps.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I mean, I was probably 12 at the time.
You can be in the Navy.
I was going to be in the Navy.
Get out of this house.
I did not. I was a little bit claustrophobic, so submarines weren't in my future. I wanted to fly helicopters.
Oh, great.
I wanted to fly Navy helicopters, rescue guys. That's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then when I became diabetic, and I found out can't go into service, they won't take you.
But they said more than that, did they not? When that experience happened.
Well, they didn't so much say that. They gave me reasons why. Because we can't guarantee you're not going to be in a combat zone. You're in a combat zone, we can't guarantee we'll get the medicine to you, so we can't take you.
Yep.
But doctors in general, school teachers, most adults were like, you have a very bleak future ahead of you. Diabetes was in its infancy back then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though this was 1961, insulin was only around since like 1910, 1915.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty new. The technology then, I had a glass syringe and a big old honking metal needle that I boiled twice a day to take a shot. Now, you get disposable syringes. We have insulin pumps that we wear. I can look at my phone and tell you what my blood sugar is.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing even similar to that.
When somebody in 1961 was diagnosed with type 1 diabetic, what was the longevity of a life that was predicted?
35 additional years.
Holy smokes.
You were
They
supposed
said
So
it'll-
you're 14, they said 35 years you'll be dead.
It'll take 35 years for the disease to do enough damage to your organs that you will suffer kidney failure, heart failure, blindness, and a host of other things.
So when you died in 1995, how are you still here with us today?
Yeah, well,
Gosh.
God's grace.
Yeah.
God,
Let's
it's
talk
the only
about
answer. I'm 78 years old this month.
that. Hallelujah.
I've been a type 1 diabetic coming up on 64 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Eli Lilly Company, who does insulin, and there's another outfit in Boston. They both give you an award if you live 50 years with diabetes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They just mail it to you?
Yeah, they say if you have to certify with
Sure.
hospital papers that
Yeah.
you're actually a type 1 diabetic
Yeah.
and you're still alive,
Yeah.
and they give you an award for 50 courageous years of living.
Jeez.
So, yeah, it's no picnic. It's getting. People say, "Well, is it getting any easier?" No, even with all the technology, it's just constant
Every day.
vigilance. Oh, absolutely. Constantly checking your blood sugar. Everything can affect it. Emotions, mood changes, weather, foods you eat, exercise, it all. And so you keep all that in balance. It's a little bit tricky.
So going back to the timeline, this is when you're 14. And again, remind me, when did you accept Jesus?
Okay, later that summer, I went to
that
summer
summer.
camp,
Okay.
and I heard Dr. John Gershner speak at the camp. It was United Presbyterian Camp. Dr. Gershner and some elders from the church came out. He spoke. They served communion, and I knew that was the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took that step of faith and accepted Jesus that night. And forever after that, R.C. would joke that he did all the work, Gershner got all the credit.
That's our role in this, right?
That's it.
Some plant
Exactly.
the seed and some water it.
You got it.
We all have
Yeah.
a role that we play.
Yeah.
So 14, you accept Christ. What was home like after that?
Same.
Yeah.
Home was the same. I would say 14, 15, 16, it got even worse.
In what way?
My father, and you can edit this out if you need to. When I was 15, I was dating a girl, and I was heading out for the evening, and he stopped me at the door to shake hands with me, and I thought, well, that was a little odd. And he said, You're 15 now. It's time for you to go out and find out what it's like to be a man. And he handed me a condom. I mean, how confusing was that? My mother would have killed him if she'd known that. And I was like, okay. So, I mean, I went and talked to RC. RC was my surrogate dad at that point.
Yeah, this is going to come up. This is why we're having this conversation right now. Obviously, in this fatherhood series where we talk about how other men can play a role that can help mold a kid, even if it's not the father.
Yep.
So please express as much of this as you feel like you need to.
Yeah, well,
it's very interesting.
As kids, we were really, when you grew up in an alcoholic home, as you both know, there's this rule. It's an unspoken rule. We have no problems, and we're not going to talk about it. And that was a very hard and fast rule in my family. Loyalty to the parents was key. Number one, had to be there, one way or the other. And it surprised us that, because homes back then were 12, 15 feet apart, and if the neighbor was brushing his teeth, you knew which of the neighbors was brushing their teeth.
Sure.
So we knew that they were hearing all the stuff that was being said, dishes being broken, all that. We knew they were hearing it. And that there were kids in the house. And the neighbors, we'd all be outside doing something, cutting grass, doing something. And the neighbors would come by, and, hi, Bud, hi, Annie. And, oh, hi, George, hi, Sue. Nobody said anything.
Don't ask, don't tell kind of neighborhood.
Was that more of an era thing? More than
well, I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was.
When you talk about, the hard, fast rule was we don't talk about it. Was that a fear-based thing that happened, like actual conversations that happen in the house, that if we talk about what happens outside this house, that there are repercussions? Or was it just this thing unspoken?
Yeah,
everybody knew?
It was unspoken. It was unspoken. It may have been spoken once or twice. But largely it was unspoken. But you knew the rule.
Yep.
You knew the rule.
Yep.
And you didn't speak about it outside the house.
Do you think even if you had in that era that anybody would have probably even listened anyways, or
No.
it was just
No. I mean, that was no. I think my grandfather had started a business, Fox Grocery Company, and when my father, when he passed away, and my dad was 10, the company went to his brother, the benevolent great uncle.
Okay.
And my father worked for that company. But, I mean, with the name Fox, easy to remember, short name, on the trucks, it was, you couldn't hide from the fact who you were. And I remember one time, I was telling Jonny about this at one point. We were in the back of a pickup truck my dad was driving. We were taking leaves somewhere, I don't know. And we're on a 4-lane highway. And he sideswiped a bus, a Greyhound bus. We're in the back of the pickup truck.
In the bed of the pickup
In the
truck,
bed.
not the back.
Not the back seat.
No,
there
not the back
there was
seat.
only a cab back in the day. It was one bench seat.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
We're in the back of the pickup truck. We sideswipe a bus on a 4-lane highway. I mean, the terror. And I remember we pulled over, and my dad just looked at us and said, "Not a word." That was it.
Sure.
Not a word.
That was back when you could throw your kids in the bed of the truck and nobody said anything about it.
No.
That was normal.
Well, the bus driver knew who he was somehow, and a couple of people on the bus knew who he was. When we got home, my mother was already outside waiting for us.
Sure.
She'd gotten several phone calls, and right there in the front yard, lit into him, and they duked it out, and not physically, but verbally. And we just cowered away and let them fight about it. So home was very disruptive.
Yeah.
Very little structure. I found myself more and more and more finding ways not to be at home.
Sure.
I joined every club and organization at school I could join. I was in the church choir, the youth group. I was in mixed chorus, county chorus, an organization called D Malay, Boy Scouts, several other clubs. I was in the National Forensic Speaking Organization. I just didn't want to be at home. So I always had to be somewhere. And, in terms of how I got around, because I wasn't old enough to drive yet, if I had to hitchhike, I hitchhiked. If I had to walk, I walked. Last thing I wanted was for my parents to drive me. I mean, who knew how that was going to end up?
No.
So moving forward from there, this household that you're in is obviously dysfunctional. And do you graduate high school? And from there, how soon do you try to get out of this house?
Graduated high school, went to college.
And you went, meaning you moved to college.
I moved to college.
Did you live on campus? Did you get a place there?
Lived on campus. I
Yeah.
lived in a dorm.
Yep.
At the end of the freshman year, I had some dental work I had to have done, wisdom teeth out. Came home, was home for the summer, went back to school, and that was the last time that I lived at home. A year in another dorm. And at the end of that year, my grades were so bad, I made the dean's list. No, the other dean's list.
The dean's list you don't want to be
The
on.
dean's list that sends you a letter and says, yeah, we don't think you're serious about college.
I got one of those.
Did
I
you?
got one of those
All
letters.
right,
Yeah.
all right. And you need to take a year off and think about it.
Yeah.
So, smart me, I find a girl who's running away from her family, and we elope.
Oh, great.
Heck
Is
yeah.
this the first marriage?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent.
I was 20. She was 19.
So you haven't graduated college yet.
Oh, no. 2
You're-
years.
You're 2 years into college.
But I have it all figured out.
Tell us about that.
Oh, we're both going to continue going to school, and we're going to graduate and get careers and raise kids and go on from there.
What actually manifested?
I worked in a steel mill.
So you graduated college.
No, I can't go back to college.
All
I
right.
have to put in a year time before I can even reapply.
Great.
Got to pay the bills.
Okay.
So I got a job in a steel mill. Took a while to get it. A little behind in the rent, a little behind in car payments, a little behind. So fortunately, it was a small town. I even owed the barber. Okay, just sign here. And so I got a second job, and I was a baker. And so from 11 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning, I baked pies and cakes and rolls and whatever, and went home, hung up my whites, put on my mill clothes, jumped in the car, worked 73 at the steel mill, came home, slept till 9, got up, had dinner, got a shower, changed into my baker's clothes, and so I did that for 3 months. Just to try and get above water.
Sure.
Years and years and years later, I thought I'd taken all the right roads. I'd made the right decisions. Okay? And I realized, man, what a foolish hardhead I was. To think that I was smarter than all the people trying to give me good advice. I just ignored it because, and I think it took me a long time to realize this, the people that you're supposed to learn these things from weren't helping me make those decisions.
Interesting.
Meaning the parents aren't there.
Yeah, I didn't have a basis for how to trust people.
Sure.
And so who do you trust? Well, you don't trust anybody. You do it on your own.
And that's what that home life teaches you, that is that I do this everything on my own.
You if you're in that kind of a situation, it teaches you you're on your own. Survival is in your lap. You figure it out.
Wow.
And so that's the route I took. And I figured, all right, I have to make this work. It's my only option.
Yeah.
I just have to do it.
So you guys are married. How many years into marriage until you till you start having children?
We got married in August of 67, and our first son was born in September of 68.
Oh, wow.
So as he's born, I'm going back to college,
Okay.
and I'm working as a youth director at a Methodist church.
Is that a paid job?
Yes,
Okay.
barely paid the bills,
Yeah.
barely.
Yeah.
So I also took on the position of constable, which is a police officer in Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Your primary job is to serve arrest warrants, court summons, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Again, being the brightest bulb on the tree, I'm arresting these guys that are 70 pounds heavier than I am, and who knows what kind of weapons they're carrying. But
This is still small town.
it's a rural county. Yeah, it's a small college town, but it's the county that I'm working within.
So you have a child now.
I have a child now.
You're working as a constable. You're also in college.
Constable.
What's
Yeah,
your
and
wife doing? What's she thinking? How's this going?
She's back in school.
Okay.
We knew that we both wanted to get degrees.
Is she a Christian?
So we both were.
Okay, great.
We both were. I was in pre-ministerial program. She was in Christian Ed. And the Baptist pastor that married us in North Carolina when we eloped said, well, have you had any premarital counseling? And we said, no. And he said, well, are you in college? Yep. What are you, pre-ministerial? Oh, you're all set. You don't need any premarital counseling.
Excellent.
Let me call one of the elders and his wife, and they came over to the church, and we got married.
Okay.
Wow.
There you go.
What'd he know?
Wow.
So that was the beginning of that.
So you're in
Pre-ministerial
Thank you.
program.
That's that big word.
At
What was your
college.
goal with that? Like, what did you want to go on to do?
I wanted to become a counseling pastor. That was my goal. I knew I didn't want to preach, but I did want to do counseling, and I wanted to do that within the context of Scripture. I thought Navy, be a captain, pilot, and then when you reach a certain age, you're an old guy. They put you through seminary, and you live out your years as a Navy chaplain. That was my ultimate goal.
Mm.
And do you remember Don Rudolph?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Don was in the Navy,
Yep.
and it was Don's goal to get me certified as a Navy chaplain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
God, I miss that guy.
yeah, I
He was hilarious, man.
I did
He's a good
too.
dude. Great guy.
Yeah, yeah. So that was my plan. But when I was working in the steel mill, that was the Vietnam era. Guys were coming back from Vietnam and working in the mill, and I would have these conversations with them, and I'd say, "Well, what do you want to do? What's your ambition?" I want to drive the crane. What? No, I mean, what do you really want to do?
Yeah, this is a job for us. This isn't a career path, but for some of these guys, they're saying my career path is at this place.
I want to drive the crane. Why?
Yeah, sure.
Well, because it's heated in the winter, it's got a fan in the summer, and I can sit down to have lunch. And I just began thinking, why do people think like this? I mean, he had the GI Bill. He wasn't dumb. It's just, why are you making these kind of... So the whole decision-making process became very interesting to me. And so I switched my major to psychology.
Okay.
Graduated with a psychology degree. Took a job with Lawrence County Child Welfare. Became a caseworker, then I became a casework supervisor. Loved the job.
What was the welfare system like in the 1970s where you were at?
I would like to think it was a little better than it is today. I would say there weren't as many cases and there were more caseworkers. I think we had some freedoms that, today you go and knock on somebody's door and say you're a caseworker, and they say, I have to talk to you, and they close the door.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, it was like a badge of real authority. If you went to a house and said, I'm from child welfare, we have a complaint, I need to speak to you privately, come on inside, have a seat, and they talk to us. Not always that willingly, but they would.
Sure.
And if we determined we had to remove children from the home because it wasn't safe, we'd call the police for backup and we'd remove the kids. Take them to the hospital, have them checked out, find them foster homes, and either oversee their care in foster care, or in some cases, the parents would abandon and you'd place them for adoption. So I did that for 3 years. And it was an eye-opener, again, in how people think, how people make decisions, and how few of these people were in church.
Yeah.
So as you're seeing these events unfold at work, how's your home life? How's your kids? How's your family?
So, Jonny, in your first episode of this series, you started out by saying I was a crummy dad. Remember that?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself when I heard that, yeah, well, in some ways I was probably a crummier dad. We were in church. We were in church all the time. Even when I was a youth director, of course, we're in church.
Right.
We leave that, graduate from school and get a job with child welfare. We're in church. But for me, it was the UP church, lots of rules, and I became a rule follower. Which is kind of strange because people see me and they say, man, if somebody's going to break the rules, it's him. I learned, but I can be a rule follower. I respect the rule of law. I can see the reasons behind it. So Pastor Rick Garrett said one time, I'm a recovering Pharisee. And I thought, oh, that's me. 100% that's me. I know all the rules. I know all the theology behind it. I'll champion that. I had zero relationship with Jesus. I knew he was God's son. I knew he died. I knew that my salvation was based on that. That's where it ended.
No grace.
Well,
I did not I'm sure I heard the word grace.
Sure.
Because I heard the hymn Amazing Grace.
yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't understand what that meant.
Right.
It's kind of like the idea that I know about Jesus, I just don't know Jesus, right?
Non-relational.
Yeah. So we're talking about the time period.
Flip your mic back around there real quick, Dave. Thanks, man.
We're talking
There you
about
go.
the time period. I got married in 1967. So was married for 29 years. Divorced.
How many kids you guys have?
4.
Okay.
4.
How old were your
Son?
kids when you guys got divorced?
3 of them were already out of the house.
Yeah, that's
My
the
youngest was 15.
math. Okay.
They're 4 years apart. So David was born in 68, Kimberly in 72, Daniel in 76, Anthony in 1980. All 4 years apart. All 4, that's leap years. Easy to remember. For them, they saw 29 years of fighting.
They would say that today.
Oh, absolutely. They would say that.
Okay.
I would be surprised if
What
they...
was fighting like in your house, though, compared to like how you grew up? When you say
You grew up in a violent house.
what was fighting like in the house that they grew up in?
just stubborn arguing.
Yeah, nothing physical.
No, just
Uncompromising. Two people uncompromising.
yes, just a lot of yelling. My wife did a lot of crying.
Mm-hmm.
I was frustrated, couldn't understand her. I was doing what I thought men were supposed to do. Go to work and provide for your family. I wasn't spending time at home helping with them when they were tiny. That was her job. I wasn't spending time with them when they were in their middle years. I was busy. I had work to do. And it wasn't that I was a career climber, like I get a sales job and I want to become the sales manager and I want to become the... It wasn't that. It's just that I'm a hard worker. And I can remember there were times when we worked at Ligonier Ministries. That was a residential study program where people came and lived with you and ate with you in your homes. And I would get up and start work at 6 in the morning, and I'd still be working at 11 o'clock at night.
So you kind of became, that youthfulness of I just don't want to be in the house, kind of became an adult who didn't want to be much in the house.
That's pretty much it.
But just masked it under the guise of,
Yeah.
I'm working and I'm
Hey, I'm
providing.
got
doing
work
what
to
I'm
do.
supposed to do as a man.
I got work to do.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, my father-in-law, he said to us about a year after we were married, he didn't talk to me the first year we were married for obvious reasons. And if I'd been
Didn't care
him,
that you eloped with his
if
daughter.
I'd been him, I'd probably just shot me.
Yeah.
I stole his oldest daughter. Totally my idea. And I didn't give her a whole lot of say in that. It's like, this is what we should do, and this is how we're going to do it. And she went along with it.
Okay.
So that's all on me. We never should have married. I know that now. I knew that years ago. But I was determined to make it work and was frustrated because I didn't feel like she was as committed to it as I was.
She was the one that sought out the divorce.
Not recognizing that her needs weren't being met. Why would she want to stay around?
Sure.
And at the time it was like, what more could you want? Providing for you and for the kids, and just be quiet and go with the flow.
Eventually she chooses not to go with the
She
flow.
chooses not to go with the flow. Yep.
It's just not enough for her.
Yeah.
You and I have spoken
To
in
give you
depth.
an example about how I felt, my father-in-law said, you find the house you want, I'll help you buy it. Well, we tried that for, 6, 7 years? Almost 8 years. And every house we found, he would come and look at it and he would say, yeah, that's not the house you want. And then give us a long list of reasons why. And I finally put together, oh, wait a minute. He means if you find the house I want you to buy, I'll help you buy it. Well, it was at that point we left that town, moved to the mountains to work for Ligonier Ministries. They had temporary housing for us. But I knew, because by then I had 2 and 1 on the way. I got to find a bigger house. Houses were expensive. This is 1977. And the houses that I could afford were not houses I would put my family in, and everything else I couldn't afford, and there just wasn't anything for rent. And so, again, I bought a piece of land, 3.5 acres, bought a chainsaw, and I went in and cut down trees, saved the ones that I could use later, got rid of the rest, hired a guy to come in and dig out a basement, and I built a house.
Wow.
They let you just do that back in the day, huh? You just build your own house.
2 permits.
Sure.
You had to pass a percolation test for your septic tank, and before they'd finally hook up your electric to the house, they did an electrical test.
That was,
That was it. That's the permit you had to have.
Jeez.
A little bit more to do today.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
I wouldn't even accept that today.
Yeah.
No. But boy, it was a great experience back then.
How old were you?
Sure.
How long into your marriage was that?
Well, I was
built that?
31 when I built the house.
Okay.
So my son was 8. 10. My son was 10. He just turned 10.
So as we fast forward here, your wife's unsatisfied. She comes to you and says, this isn't working for me. It's time to move on. And you, I remember this from our friendship here, weren't happy with that. There was a lot of in and out of the church trying to make things right.
Well, we went to start going to marriage counseling.
Sure.
At one point, I probably had an appointment with every marriage counselor in Orlando. I mean, I used to joke that I could either do marriage counseling or I could have a really nice car.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen the crappy car I'm driving? Yeah, we go to marriage counseling.
Her kicking and screaming going?
No, there were times when she would find a counselor and she was excited about going.
So there was this turn where she was
And we would go and he would listen to the two of us, and then he'd make an appointment with her, and then he'd make an appointment with me, and then we'd come back together. And a couple of times he would say, or she would say, well, I don't think the problem here is with Dave. And that would be it. We would leave, and she would declare that the counselor had no idea what they were talking about. We're never coming back here again. And there would be this 2 or 3 month of uneasy coexistence. And then a couple of months where we actually were getting along, and then right back into the normal pattern.
How many years did you guys go through counseling before you finally got divorced?
We were married for 27 years. We probably did counseling for 20. Off and on.
Well, you can't say you didn't try.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's a long time. 20 years. Holy smokes.
Did I mention I was stubborn?
So if you had to do it over again, you would have just gone to see Bob Newhart right at the very beginning.
Well, and Bob Newhart would have said, that's a really dumb idea, don't elope.
Stop it.
Sure.
Yeah, just stop it. Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah, stop right now.
So you guys get divorced. Is there any impact that you see on your kids? Your kids said this was the right thing to do.
I had
It's
seen
about
the
time.
impact on my kids for years.
Okay.
I mean,
What kind of impact do you think it had then?
it's devastating. When your parents can't get along, and life at home is just kind of miserable. You know, I mean, who wants to hang out at home if the parents are just going to yell at each other?
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, that wasn't every single day.
Yes.
You know,
Obviously.
we had vacations, we had brief periods where things were great. The irony in all this is this whole time I was an elder at church.
Sure. Well, boy, so you're saying people that go to church aren't perfect, including leadership.
Including leadership.
Wow.
Yeah.
Revelation here today, folks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Andy and I'll be the first to tell you.
Water's also wet.
One of the qualifications for elder that's not in Scripture is you have to make a lot of mistakes and learn from them
And
Sure.
learn from them.
before you're qualified to say to somebody else, you're making a mistake.
It makes sense.
We talked in one of our conversations that we had about this in this series was like we talked about how do I begin to lead, and the one way we begin to lead is there's one way. It's time. It's time, wisdom, discernment, steadfastness. And so the only way you get to leadership is I have to have gone through enough of this junk and learn from those decisions to be able to help to lead other people. If I can't speak your language of I've been there to be able to help you get around it, it's very tough for you to be an effective leader for people.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it makes you the effective counselor you are today.
Yeah. Well, after my divorce, Kathy's
Your current wife.
yes, current wife, began dating.
Give us a
What's the
time
gap
frame.
between?
I left home in summer of 96. We got married in May of 98.
Okay.
Started attending Northland.
Okay.
Was Mike a preacher there at the time?
Mike was preaching.
Okay.
When Joel Hunter was not preaching, Mike was preaching. So probably once a month, he would do the weekend. And we really enjoyed Mike's teaching. After a year in the church, we decided the first year we weren't going to join anything, do anything. We were just going to get used to the idea of being married again. She had been married previously.
How was her marriage previously?
Her husband had had a number of affairs, and they divorced, and she'd been divorced for 12 years.
Okay.
She had 2 kids, 2 teenagers, a daughter and a son.
How do you think she learned to trust you then after all that time being by herself?
Good question.
Well, she worked for me at Ligonier.
So she was able to kind of walk with you on this.
When we were at Ligonier together, she reported to me, and what she saw was, here's a guy who RC had enough trust in to let run things. He was an elder of the church. For all practical purposes, my family appeared to be normal and good.
Mm-hmm.
And so you learn from who you're working with and for whether you can trust them or not.
Sure.
So she knew that. Her kids learned that because they worked there part-time in the summers.
Okay.
In fact, my oldest son worked for her one summer, So the families knew each other. They knew each other.
What do you think you even started doing different in this relationship that you had been lacking in the other one?
When we started dating,
Yeah.
we started praying together.
Wow.
I mean, it was, look, I've really screwed up my life. Here's where I went off track.
This is you telling her?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it's really important to me that we be on the same track in terms of the church, in terms of our faith, in terms of prayer. And so we began by praying for our children.
Sure.
That's how the prayers started out.
Well,
And whether or not we should get married.
I love that we've talked about this in our podcast here, Dave, which is the idea of when you found a person that you think might be right, starting to lay it down these fundamental foundational priorities, beset by you, in you, from Christ. Mm-hmm. These are principles that you should be discussing early on in any relationship to make sure you're going to be on the same page as you try to join and then move forward together. This is the foundation I stand on. Do you want to meet me here? Yeah. And these things are important. And the fact that you guys were doing that initially just sets the groundwork for success in the future. You've already set all the guidelines and the guard posts, and it's now you can walk that path.
When Andy said, well, if you could go back and do it over again. Mm-hmm. If I go back and do it over again, well, first of all, I wouldn't have gotten married when I did. But let's say I had. Given the chance to come back around and do it again, I would have started reading and teaching my son early on and stayed with that.
Teaching your son what?
Scripture.
Yeah.
Great.
Faith.
Yeah.
What's right, what's wrong.
Yeah. Biblical principles.
Biblical principles. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You brought up the prayer thing too. We read statistics that less than 1% of couples that pray together get divorced. Less than 1. So it's almost like you want the golden, the magic bullet, the golden rule, whatever it may be. Pray with your spouse. That seems to be the one thing that seems to hold everybody together.
I do quite a bit of couples counseling,
mm-hmm.
marriage counseling, if you will. And oftentimes, when they come into the room, I'll start with who wants to go first. And usually it's the person that has filed the complaint and asked for counseling. And I start with, why are you here? And I hear this list of things that, for instance, he's not doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let the list run itself out. And I'll turn to him and say, are these true? Which usually catches them very off guard. And oftentimes it's, yeah, they are. I'll say, okay, well, what are we going to do about this? And we start talking about it in dialogue. And it always involves, okay, because they'll ask the question, can you fix this marriage? And I say, nope, I cannot fix this marriage. Jesus can. I can't. I can show you how and what steps to take, but I can't fix it. You have to do that.
Right.
Okay, what do we do? I said, well, first of all, you have to start spending time together each day, and that time together has to include prayer. And I'll look at the man and say, and that's your job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why does it have to be my job? because that's what Scripture says.
That's what God said.
You're to be the priest
Pretty
of
simple.
your home. Look it up.
Yeah.
And they go,
Spiritual leader.
oh, okay. And I always give them a devotional and encourage them to use it. Start out simple.
Yeah.
I said, you don't have to spend an hour together. Start out slow, build from there.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time it works.
That's
I
great.
mean, I can go to church on the weekend and I can look around and I can see different couples and I can see that it's working.
My wife and I took marriage counseling from you before we got married. You were our marriage counselor. We still have the books you recommended, and then a book that you also gave us sitting right on the mantle at the house. My wife was the first one to start reading it. I then read it later on. We took it very seriously. You know, you were a guy that presented well. You presented the witness of Christ to us from jump, and we wanted to have success. So we were hungry for success, and you gave us a good template to work our way through. You know, it was excellent.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, we specifically, my wife and I adhered to it, and we have a great marriage.
How did so you and Kathy get together, and she's got 2 kids. What was the time split with Kathy with those kids?
How old are her kids, by the way?
Yeah.
Well, so my oldest is 56. Then her daughter's 54.
So her kids were out of the house then too, by the time you guys are getting married.
Her son was, they were both in college.
Okay. How do they accept you as a stepdad?
Well, they knew me. They knew me from church,
And they knew you
They knew me
from
from
that
work.
time at work. Okay.
from work, respected me. We had a good relationship.
Well, that's a
My-
pretty good transition.
My wife, Kathy, has a great relationship with my kids.
Why do you think
mean-
that is?
Well, first because of who she is,
Okay.
because they see how she's treating me and caring for me
Sure.
and responding to our marriage.
Yep.
And so they have great respect for her.
Mm-hmm.
There are times when I think they'd probably rather come and visit her, than possibly come under Dad's direction, discipline, wrath. They have a great relationship, and I have a great relationship with her kids.
So now,
Her daughter, my stepdaughter,
yeah.
from the time we've gotten married, which will be 27 years, has never missed a Father's Day. She always shows up with a card and a gift.
Fantastic. That's got to feel great.
Yeah, it does.
You came from a house
does.
where that kind of emotion wasn't present. And you've been able to, with God's help, create a house that emotion is present, that people are excited to show up for it. And it overflows. I mean, clearly, as we're laying out here, the life that you're having and these experiences that you're having, you're a counselor now, you help other married couples, including myself, have a better marriage. And you came from this house that had a very dysfunctional, and then even your first marriage in its own ways had its own dysfunctions that didn't make for success. It really just shows this journey Christ has had you on to develop you as a man that could then influence such a great, many around you in this thing that you had such a trail of tears from prior.
Yeah,
It's so interesting.
Part of our responsibility as fathers is to model the way our kids are to be. I'm to model to my sons how they're supposed to treat women.
Yeah.
I didn't do that real well. I'm to model to my daughter the kind of person she's supposed to look for in a future mate. I didn't do that very well. Okay. I mean, statistically, I could have 4 disasters out there.
Yeah.
They are all highly functioning adults with great families that love one another. They're raising their kids well.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. God has really, really redeemed things in that regard.
I think the important part there too is like, I think that guys need to hear this too, is like, it's never too late to start doing that,
Oh,
right?
heavens. Listen, one of my sons, the son that is most like me, got angry with something I said or did and didn't talk to me for 5 years. I didn't even know where he was for 5 years. Yes, I could go to his siblings and say,
Is
hey,
he okay?
where is he? What's he doing? Where in the world is he? But that puts an unfair burden on them. So I knew not to do that. And so I just prayed and waited. And 5 years later, one night I get a phone call and I look at it and it says Eugene, Oregon. I don't know anybody in Eugene, Oregon. I just hit off.
Johnny, you know Johnny.
I lived in Eugene,
Well,
Oregon for
this
a
was
very long
before-
time. Yeah. I know.
Before we met.
Yes, sir.
And then it called right back. And I thought, So I picked it up and I said, hello. And his voice said, hey, Pops, you got a minute to talk? And we were on the phone for an hour and a half. And then the following week, we were on the phone for an hour and a half. And the following week, we were on the phone for an hour.
What were those conversations like?
Oh, at first, they were brutal. They were brutal. And my younger brother, interesting, my younger brother also has pursued counseling, biblical counseling, and he now is teaching courses at college and seminary in counseling. And he said to me, you know, when the two of you start these conversations, it's going to feel to you, it's going to feel a lot like somebody's throwing up on you. And you're going to have to determine ahead of time, are you going to stand there and let it happen and just listen? Or are you going to jump back in horror and not be a part of that?
Right.
And I'd predetermined that whatever he had to say, he had to say. You got to let it out.
Yeah.
And he did. He did. We had some rough conversations. But I can tell you this, we're great friends today.
That's fantastic.
We're
Hallelujah.
great friends today. He's married. He's got a daughter. And in fact, she's the first daughter on our side of the family. Kathy's side, it's all girls. My side, it was all boys. Until Pearl was born.
How long ago was that?
Pearl just turned 2.
Excuse me. How long ago was the confrontation with your son? How
That's
many years
been,
removed are you from that?
let's see, 2, 3, 4. That's been probably 7, 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we run kind of up near the end of this thing, I kind of wanted to talk about your heart for mentoring now. You gave me a book a while back to read that's about young men and how you can best minister to young men. And I've read it. Andy now has it. He's reading it. And clearly you have a heart for that. You have some young men that you're mentoring now. Where does that hunger come from? Is that from Sproul and his time spent with you and your buddies and kind of pouring into you? Now you're at a certain age where you feel like my kids are out of the house. That influence isn't there in that form. I still want to be giving back, and here's how. Or maybe you can best kind of go about how that came about for you and how you go about achieving that mentorship.
Sure. When early on, Andy asked me, well, where was that going? What was that track? What did you want to do? And I said, I want to do pastoral counseling. So I've been a caseworker. I've done college administration. I've done nonprofit work. I've done operations all my life, all these different jobs, all kinds of different things. Volunteer, fireman, police officer. Okay. All of that has been a training ground. That's been my educational journey to do what I'm doing now, which is to be a volunteer pastor doing counseling for people that want to talk about their lives, how to make better choices, how to make their marriages work. Why don't my kids like me? How can I be a better parent? How can I be a better person in the community? All these things. And God is using me now to do exactly what it was that I wanted to do when I was 15, 16. Finally came around.
Yeah.
And
You needed to get the tool belt together.
I get tool belt together. I wasn't qualified
Yeah.
then or most of the way along the way.
Yeah.
But I finally reached a point where I feel like, oh, okay, God can really use me now. And when I retired in 2008, I went to Pastor Mike, and I said, I'm retiring, and I want to give my retirement to the church. What do you want me to do? And in 2008, we were climbing, growing, but not real fast.
As a church.
But we were going. And he said, the only way I'm going to have time to grow this church is if I unload some things off my plate. He said, I want you to take over benevolence, hospital visits, and pastoral counseling. And so that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been the absolute privilege of my life to be able to do that for the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so specifically you ask about mentoring. There's no greater way for an older person to serve a younger person than to try to give them some wisdom. When I was a teenager, I wouldn't have listened to wisdom if I knew what it was.
Sure.
I just wasn't ready to hear it. At some point, I was ready to hear, but I had to find somebody that had it to share.
Yep.
I want to be that person. I want to be available to do that, regardless of the age.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're 20 or whether you're 72.
Yeah.
You know, I want to sit down and talk with you and share what I can.
If you had somebody come in and go, what should I look for in a mentor? What would you tell them to be specifically looking out for?
There's a difference between being educated and being wise.
Mm.
You have to be educated. You have to be aware of what's going on in the world. You have to know how things work. But you also have to have the ability of making solid biblical decisions.
So good.
So there has to be some wisdom in there too. Well, how do you gain wisdom? Well, you start by asking God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Solomon, God says, I'll give you anything you want. Anything you want. Solomon says, I want to be wise.
So that I can help my people.
Sign me up. Yeah. So that's a worthy goal for all men.
Yeah.
Not just somebody that wants to do counseling or be a mentor. You got to be wise to make good decisions.
That's it.
If any of you lacks wisdom, ask God and he will give abundantly.
There you go.
That's it.
That's where you start.
I wrote this down. Mentoring. Kids that have a mentor are 55% more likely to enroll in college. They're 130% more likely to have a position of leadership in the work they choose. They're 46% less likely to use drugs. 46% less likely to use drugs. 81% more likely to participate in sports and activities, extracurricular activities throughout school. Those are huge things that we know make massive impacts. We said it the other day, Andy, in the podcast, is that 85% of people that are locked up didn't have a father in the house. And a mentor, if you can't have kids, or if you already have kids that are out of the house, any of those things, like Andy said before, it's never too late. When's the right time? Now. Mm-hmm. When? Now. You can always be doing these things. You can always be stepping into that void that somebody else has with your experience and your time, as Dave is saying here, taking the time to really invest in somebody else and give back some of the abundance that you've received. And gosh, Dave, we just thank you so much for your time today, man. What a great story. Thank you for being so open to share some of the pain of your youth and some of the painful things in your life, but also the victories that Christ took you through.
Yeah. The vulnerabilities that you share with people, I think that's the realness of things, that people need to hear these stories from people like you that have been around for a while, that are willing to share your life. I think you said it so well. The way you're able to be wise is you have to go through some stuff first, but you have to not only go through it, but you have to learn from it.
You have to learn from it. You can't just make mistakes and make them again and again and again. You have to learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to tell people that Solomon just asked for wisdom and got it. if I have any wisdom, it's because I've made every mistake in the book and learned from it.
Yeah.
And, I was fortunate enough that God put R.C. Sproul in my life to be a mentor.
Yes.
That's where it started. And I would say that if I made any good decisions, I'd have to credit that to his being my mentor. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I really could make my own good decisions.
Yeah.
Long time.
Andy and I speak about this constantly. It is vital for men to have mentors in their life. It's second only to being in the book. Mm-hmm. You should have people around you that are biblically oriented to be pouring into you and helping you. That's why Andy and I are so close with you, Dave,
Yeah.
and why we honor you so much and your time that you spend with us outside of here, but in here as well. And then
Should be mentoring other people.
should be
as well.
mentoring other people too, is that next phase, is as you develop experience and you learn the right from the wrong and the ups and the downs, you should be expressing it to those who are just a step behind you or a couple of steps behind you and trying to give them a hand and help them on up so maybe they can avoid some of those negativisms that we experienced as individuals.
Yeah, I think my parting word would be, you talked about isolation being the real enemy of man.
Yeah.
And that's true. And I think one of the reasons for that is I don't like admitting to somebody else that I don't have the answers.
Gosh.
If I admit to you that I don't know the answers, who am I?
Yep.
And so you have to be able to do that, to go to somebody to say, hey, I noticed you're making some pretty good choices in life. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me the path. What's the way to do that? Can you help me?
Yeah.
And that's tough to do. So we need to find ways to draw men out, to get them to open up and stop being afraid to admit they don't have all the answers.
Gosh, that's great advice. What a great way to part.
Yeah.
As Bob Newhart would say.
Stop it.
Stop it. Guys, Dave Fox, thank you so much, Dave, for coming and joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
My privilege.
Everybody out there, we just want to thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jonny Hanson. This is my good buddy, Andy Lamb. We just want to pray that you have a deep and a fulfilling relationship with Jesus and that he blesses you all the days of your life.
And all God's people said.
They say
Amen.
amen.
Amen. Thanks, Dave.
You bet.
Appreciate you,
Appreciate
pal.
you, brother.
Bye, guys.